Hi, I'm Kristen, and I'm here to show you around NI TestStand. TestStand is test management software. It allows you to develop, debug, and deploy test systems. In this short video, I'll introduce you to the TestStand development environment. We'll run and edit a simple test sequence, and finally, we'll run that sequence from a deployable user interface. I'll start by opening the TestStand sequence editor. This is the name for the development environment for TestStand. The first thing that you'll note is that you're prompted by a user manager. So the user manager is a utility in TestStand that allows you to separate developmental privileges by a user. So I can have a system architect with full editing rights, and then an operator who can only run the test sequence. I'm going to log in by default as our administrator with a blank password. And this is our development environment. In the center pane here, we have the steps pane. So this is where I can start to place those individual steps, the smallest unit of my test sequence. So I'm going to go ahead and open a shipping example that simulates testing on a mobile device. Now, not all of us are going to be testing mobile devices, but I wanted to show this example because it's a quick flex of just how many languages TestStand can call. So we have a simulation dialog up here that's calling into some .NET code. We also have some C code for a battery voltage test, and then some LabVIEW code for an LCD video test. Down in the bottom here, on my step settings pane, this is where I can select that particular piece of code to call and specify the inputs and outputs that TestStand is going to work with. So TestStand has support for a number of languages in this fashion, and we can also call scripting languages. So I'll go ahead and execute this. And the first thing TestStand is going to do is it's going to load up my test code modules. And here we see a simulation dialog. So again, we're only simulating the test on this mobile device. I'll go ahead and select something to fail, just so we can see what that'll look like. And as the sequence executes, TestStand will step through and show a preliminary status in the status column on the right-hand side. At the end, I'll see a basic test report. Right now, I have an HTML report generated, but TestStand can generate reports in a number of different formats, as well as log to a database. We can see that for this particular execution, my UUT, or unit under test, failed. And if I look down in that test report, I can see the individual results from my steps, and I can take a look at my failure step. So the next thing that we'll do is see how we can edit this test sequence. So let's maybe test the audio on this mobile device. For this, I'll use a VI that I created beforehand that simply returns a decibel value for that audio test. I'm going to choose a numeric limit test step from my insertion palette because I want to evaluate that decibel value against some known test limits. So let's say my high and low limits are going to be 19 and 20 decibels. I can configure that in the step settings for this particular test step, and then select my VI to call. We can see that TestStand loads the connector pane of that VI and automatically loads in some input and output values. Here we can see my decibels, which I'll expect this VI to return. The last thing I'll do is tell TestStand to store my decibel value in the step.result.numeric value. So this is a value that my numeric limit test step is expecting to receive. Lastly, I'll just rename this to represent my audio test. And now I'm ready to execute. So just as before, I'll see my simulation dialog. This time I won't select anything to fail. And then we'll step through with the addition of my audio test. So I passed this test, and let's see if we can find my decibel value. There it is. My audio test returned somewhere between 19 and 20 decibels. Now, let's save this test sequence and call it from a TestStand operator interface. So now I'm going to take that same test sequence and call it from an operator interface. An operator interface in TestStand is just an interface that you can use to call that sequence outside of the development environment. So if you wanted to maybe deploy the test sequence to a factory floor. Now, TestStand ships with operator interfaces in 5 different languages. There's also a simple and full-featured version of that operator interface. Let's go ahead and take a look at a simple operator interface written in LabVIEW. So you can see here, I only have the ability to open a sequence file, execute that, maybe see some information on what steps are displayed in that sequence and some preliminary reporting information. I don't have the ability to edit that test sequence. So I've selected the sequence file that we just worked on, and now I'll go ahead and run that. I see my same simulation dialog, and I can watch TestStand step through that execution again. And when the execution is complete, I'll see my report generated below. Today, we've introduced you to TestStand, showing you how to run a test sequence, create your own test steps in that test sequence, and finally run that through a deployable operator interface in TestStand. To learn more about TestStand, go to ni.com/teststand.